Welcome back to Nonsense, I'm Chris, and when our Rick was young and his Summer and Diane were still alive, it does seem like he truly valued his family, unlike the other Ricks. Which is why, when he was visited by Rick Prime, who at this point had been visiting various realities in order to recruit other Ricks to his own version of the Citadel, Prime got angry that Rick would choose his family over himself, choosing to blow up our Rick's family rather than allow him to exist in peace. Most people say Prime did this because he felt insulted, because this guy, who he considered beneath him, was acting like he was better than him. But I disagree, because while he probably did feel a little insulted for that reason, what Rick C-137 really represented was actually a sincere threat in the form of a different ideology. Prime was building his own community of Ricks, and teaching them to idolize familial isolation and treating the entirety of the universe as if it's a big playpen just for them. This ideology was like the source of Prime's real power over the other Ricks, and the real point of even giving them the portal guns was so he couldn't be alone. And Rick C-137 was a direct threat by one, offering his own ideology based on actually caring for his family, and secondly, something I haven't seen anyone else comment on, is that during this scene,
Well, if it isn't us. You know the worst part about inventing teleportation? Suddenly you're able to travel the whole galaxy and the first thing you learn is you're the last guy to invent teleportation. Fortunately, you're about to invent something much more powerful.
Prime very clearly is evaluating Rick C-137's progress on his portal tech. I'm guessing he always did this with any Rick he visited, but I also think our Rick was much further along the process than any other Rick that Prime had ever encountered. Look at the familiarity with which he grabs this smoldering piece of black sludge that used to be fruit. He knows exactly what that is, and knows that this Rick has already created the portal fluid, the gun, and while right now traversing the portal causes damage, C-137 would definitely have figured out how to fix that eventually, as evidenced by the fact that he literally does. We also don't know for sure that he only intended on killing Summer and Diane, and based on the fact that Rick was injured and it's really just luck that he was in his car at that moment, and that the car flipping didn't kill him because this was before he had any robot parts, I do think it's safe to say that this was an attempt on Rick's life. It just only killed Summer and Diane, so Prime wasn't doing this as punishment for Rick insulting him. He was doing it because he saw a real threat who was going to create his own portal tech with or without Prime, unlike the other Ricks, and could have influence that he didn't want him to have. He could taint the thoughts of the other Ricks with his differing ideology, especially since he also created his own portal tech, putting him up there with Prime in their eyes, especially this early in the timeline when what a quote-unquote Rick was would still have been kind of open to suggestion and not cemented by decades of life and other Rick interactions with the same attitude and lifestyle. I also think this recontextualizes Rick's early hunt for Prime, since before this moment the only Ricks with portal tech were Ricks that Prime wanted to have it, and could definitely view as less intelligent than him. He wasn't hiding or on the run before. He was enjoying life, going from reality to recruit more bros to party across the multiverse with. But C-137 crashes the scene by becoming the first Rick serial killer, going through and murdering every other version of himself he comes across, at least at first. This probably scared the ever-living shit out of Prime. Even if he never showed it, his actions did. He spent decades hiding from C-137 and finally killed all the Dianes as a deterrent. But based on this line,
I upgraded this thing, by the way. The new version can fire more than once.
he clearly went all out. This wasn't like a thing he threw together like how Arik does with most his tech. Doing this even once was him going all out, balls to the wall, in an attempt to deter Rick from pursuing him any further. And you can bet he was trying to kill C-137 as well. He didn't kill every Diane before first trying to kill just C-137. This was his ultimatum, him calling out what he saw as the flaw in Rick's ideology, his real weakness, that he actually cared about the people in his life while Prime could give a shit about killing infinite versions of his own wife. It was his way of letting Rick know that even if he couldn't kill him, there were still ways he could hurt him. The crazy thing really is to realize that while Prime consistently failed at stopping and killing Rick, he did succeed in his original goal before realizing C-137 was even a threat, he was really there to recruit him to his lifestyle and way of thinking by offering him infinity in exchange for letting go of his heart, so that Prime himself could feel less lonely and like less of a monster. And ultimately, he kind of succeeded there. I don't think it's in dispute that Rick destroyed Prime's entire Earth as revenge. I mean, in the opening scene of the show, he wants to murder everyone on the planet but Morty and Jessica. That's not really something I can see this version of Rick doing. But after experiencing this, plus watching every version of Diane get destroyed, he was just broken enough to justify it. But technically, that's 8 billion innocent lives he took for nothing, because he knew ultimately Prime didn't even care about this reality. He just hoped he could hurt him a little. He killed 8 billion people out of the hope he could hurt Prime a little. So Prime definitely succeeded to a small degree in pulling Rick over to his ideology. And really, the biggest arc of the show has been our Rick trying to fix himself, allowing himself to feel, love, and care again. That's really the best part of the show, in my opinion. If we're talking about relatability, which for all its sci-fi nature, I do think the show thrives on relatability more than anything. And the entire story is really reflective of something from the real world that I think Dan Harmon was using as a sort of model for the conflict, which is that of the quote-unquote masculine identity. The way that, at least until very recently, men were sort of expected to, or at least it was considered acceptable and normal and healthy to be sort of disconnected from your feelings. That caring is somehow a bad thing. That something like empathy is somehow a sin or a weakness. An ideology that unfortunately has taken the minds of what I consider to be the weakest of men among us today. When these men encounter other men with the actual self-confidence to be vulnerable, caring, and kind, who still have managed to make something of themselves in the world that, from their perspective, requires men to ignore their emotions and feelings, those old school men tend to perceive a threat of some kind from this new kind of man and go on the attack for some reason. And just like Prime, they also have this weird habit of constantly trying to convince other men to their quote-unquote side of things. Not just stating their beliefs firmly, which is one thing, but feeling like they need to convince you as well as a fellow man. The conflict between Prime and C-137 is really emblematic of the fight between toxic masculinity and positive masculinity, something I think Harmon does struggle with, and he's known for wanting his stories to be relatable to the viewer more than anything else, and I'd say he nailed it.